November 11th is Veterans Day in the United States, and I think few words need to be said about this. U.S. service member, by and large, with, of course, exception always of those few individuals who are not honorable, are some of the most honorable people I have ever met. They are our brothers, our sisters, our sons, and our daughters, and they deserve to be honored. But more importantly, they deserve to be protected, and this is what I am making this video about, because they are not protected. Who are they not protected against? They are not protected against our domestic leaders who have been misusing them for many generations now, and this is what I'm going to talk about here. A lot of the wars, which weren't even called wars, a lot of the military engagements that the United States government has forced us to participate in have been started under false pretenses. The most notable of those are probably the Gulf of Tonkin incident that started official military involvement in the Vietnam War, which was a false flag operation, and also the weapons of mass destruction in the Second Iraq War, which they never existed, and our government knew that they didn't exist. So our service member, our veterans, they were taken away from their families, from their children, from their loved ones, from their parents, and sent to fight, to kill, and to die for unnecessary reasons. And this is a travesty, in my opinion, and this is why I'm always going to continue to speak out against this. Supporting our troops means that you make sure that they are used only for actual defense of the homeland, not as cannon fodder for the billionaires and the international bankers and politicians so they can show how big and bad they are, right? Supporting our troops doesn't mean that we should be happy that they have been sent by the politicians to areas to kill and die where they don't need to be, where there was no necessity. This is a phrase that the politicians use against mothers and fathers and wives and husbands to get them to drop their opposition to any war and actually support sending their loved ones into harm's way for no reason whatsoever. First thing I want to talk about is the Constitution and how unconstitutional every single military engagement, I won't call it war because this is how politicians find a way around the Constitution. So that is my first objection. Politicians find a way around the Constitution by simply not calling war a war, so then the Congress doesn't have to involve war. Our Constitution says that Congress shall have the power to declare war, and this is in the first article of the Constitution, Section 8, Clause 1. And that is repeatedly being violated by the politicians. There's a reason for this. There is a reason why the Constitution says this. George Washington actually said, "The Constitution vests the power of declaring war with Congress. Therefore, no offensive expedition of importance can be undertaken until we have deliberated on the subject and authorized such a measure." Thomas Jefferson wrote to James Madison on September 6, 1789, "We have already given an example, one effectual check to the dog of war." These people were against war by transferring the power of letting him loose from the executive to the legislative body, from those who are to spend to those who are to pay. The president spends the money. He doesn't care. It is the people who have to pay for war, and this is why they have the power they should have the power to declare war or not to declare war. James Madison wrote to Thomas Jefferson, "The Constitution supposes what the history of all government demonstrates, that the executive is the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it. It has accordingly, with studied care, vested in the question of war in the legislature." So the president is most likely to wage war, and this is why war needs to be declared by Congress before we can go and fight. But that has been just skirted by just not calling it war. Abraham Lincoln wrote, "The provision of the Constitution giving the war-making powers to Congress was dictated, as I understand it, by the following reasons. Kings had always been involved in impoverishing their peoples in wars, pretending generally, if not always, that the good of the people was the object. This our Constitutional Convention understood to be the most oppressive of all kingly oppressions, and they resolved to the same frame the Constitution that no one man shall hold the power of bringing this oppression upon us." Well, our government has found a way around it, and it is our veterans who always pay the price. It is your children, it is my children, it is our loved ones that always pay the price. These people, the international bankers, the multinational companies who have interest in other countries, they are the ones that can easily buy our politicians and skirt our Constitution to get us involved in wars. And I wanted to just draw your attention to one of very enlightening writings that a Major General, United States Marine Corps Major General, one of the most decorated Marines in history, Major General Smedley Butler, wrote. He said, "How many of these war millionaires shouldered a rifle? How many of them dug a trench? How many of them knew what it meant to go hungry in a rat-infested dugout? How many of them spent sleepless, frightened nights ducking shells and shrapnel and machine gun bullets? How many of them parried a bayonet thrust of an enemy? How many of them were wounded or killed in battle?" Out of war, nations acquire additional territory, and if they are victorious, they just take it. This newly acquired territory promptly is exploited by the few, the oil companies and the bankers. The selfsame few who wrung dollars out of blood in the war. The general public shoulders the bill. And what is this bill? This bill renders a horrible accounting, newly placed gravestones, mangled bodies, shattered minds, broken hearts and homes, economic instability, depression, and all its attendant miseries. Backbreaking taxation for generations and generations. For a great many years as a soldier, I had a suspicion that war is a racket. Not until I retired to civil life did I fully realize it. Now that I see the international war clouds gathering as they are today, and they are, he's talking about World War I or II, I believe, but they are gathering today as well. I must face it and speak out, and this is why I'm speaking out. I'm nothing like him. I am a maggot compared to him, but I will learn from him and try to tell everybody else. War is a threat to liberty. It is everybody. Once the war starts, you become a slave. President Eisenhower, who also happened to be general, said, "The problem in defense is how far you go without destroying from within what you are trying to defend from without." And James Madison said, "Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded, because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War is a parent of armies. From these proceed debts and taxes, and armies and debts and taxes are known instrument for bringing the many under dominion of the few." Look at what's going on in Ukraine. People are drafted. Once war starts, you become a slave. They take your children, they take your spouse, they take your money, they take everything and make you a slave. And this is why war should be always the last resort. Every patriot should be against war unless somebody is invading our country. But that's not what our politicians do. They continue to fearmonger us, and we constantly fall for it. There is no credible threat to homeland to where we need to fight Russia or to where we need to fight Iran or North Korea. We don't need to do any of that. It is these politicians and their benefactors, the international bankers and the oil companies, who get to profit from this. But they will always continue to warmonger. Alexander Hamilton said, "Safety from external danger is the most powerful director of national conduct. Even the ardent love of liberty will after a time give way to its dictates. The violent destruction of life and property incident to war, the continual effort and alarm attendant to a state of continual danger, will compel nations the most attached to liberty to resort for repose and security to institutions which have a tendency to destroy their civil and political rights. To be safer, they are at length becoming willing to ruin the risk of being less free." We are willing to sell our freedom to feel safer, and that is not the American way. It is our duty. The duty of our service members is to protect us, and it is our duty as civilians to protect them by demanding that our politicians hold on to the Constitution and not always get us involved in war. There was a reason why our Constitution was made this way. When Japan attacked us in World War II, these people who don't agree on anything, they were the ones that were able to agree and go to war because we were attacked. They wouldn't agree. Their disagreement is by design. We really have to be in danger for them to agree, and this is how it should work. But this is how it doesn't work because we as civilians have failed our veterans. So that is my message for Veterans Day.